What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I am back here with another video. And before I talk about the Jeremy Swayman situation and how I feel like it's going to conclude, uh, make sure you follow everything down below and subscribe or follow my Twitch channel. We do watch alongs, and I just found creative ways to make sure that it's enjoyable. I added a ticker and official scoreboard. Just things like this. I did one earlier today. They are fun, they are enjoyable, they are entertaining, and you guys should stop by and watch them. Now let's get right into the Jeremy Swayman situation. Now, for you guys that don't know, this happened. We all knew that this was going to get rough before. You know, arbitration, when you go to arbitration, 9 times out of 10, it will, I guess not 9 times, but a lot of times it is not fun because of the players basically have to be told by their teams that they're not worth what they think they are, and they will kind of discredit you and kind of put you down, and it sucks. And Swayman talked about that, and going into this season, it's like he still doesn't have a deal. Every day it gets closer and closer, and his agent is the same as Nylander's, who obviously I believe it was 20 games he sat out before they ended up signing him, and you know that's pretty much up until December, until they finally said screw it, fine, we'll take a deal. Um, you know, the Bruins can't last that long without Swayman, and they either got to get a deal done or they got to trade him. We're going to talk about the 7 trade candidates that Open Ice suggested and why I think they make sense. But obviously, the general manager kind of came out and said, well, he has 64 million reasons why, which means an 8-year, $8 million deal was on the table and Swayman didn't take it. And everyone immediately jumped on Swayman and was like, well, Swayman doesn't deserve more than 8 on 8. Or 8 times 8. He doesn't deserve that. He does not deserve more. He doesn't deserve $9 or $10 million. He needs to, calm it down. And I think he's a really good goalie, and everyone's saying or discrediting that if he doesn't play behind the Bruins, he's not he's a different goalie. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think if you put him behind a good defensive team like Colorado, Vegas, Dallas, he's probably one of the best in the league, and almost like Vasilevsky type great. But I think that he is a great goaltender. He does the right things. He does what a lot of the good goaltenders tend to do when it comes to beating the passes, when it comes to the positioning and such stuff like that. But now we got to the point where his agent basically said, we need to take a minute to think about what our next move is. And you basically just told, when you give out public information out like that, that could piss off the player, because you just attempted to make him look bad. And now that he already has this kind of discomfort with you and the season's about to start, he wants to play, but he's not going to play with an organization that doesn't appreciate him. And that he's not signing an 8-year deal with a team that doesn't like him, who is treating him like this. So how do you know he's not? They're not going to stab you in the back later on. So these are the 7 teams that are possibly in on a trade for him. And once again, this is on Open Ice. Colorado. Colorado makes sense for many reasons. Number one, they really don't have a solidified number 1 goaltender. Yes, they have Georgiev, which, by the way, they would have to trade their star goalie, Georgiev, to the Bruins in this deal. And I think that he would be really good in Colorado. I think Colorado would be competing for years to come. And I think that with him in that defense, it would be a really deadly unit. And they have good offensive power. And I think that that's a good thing to have in a goaltender who could play his style. I think they would definitely get an upgrade in the goaltending department, and they would have their goaltender for the next 8 years. And I think that that's what Colorado wants. I mean, when you think about Colorado and their goaltending situation the last few years, like, they really haven't had a solid number 1 option that's consistent. Kemper, Georgiev, Grubauer just a few years ago. So now this would be their solidified goaltender. Carolina makes a lot of sense. I don't like the Eastern Conference. I just feel like they would try to take him out of the Eastern Conference. But at the end of the day, I think they'll take anybody who they can get a good haul in return. And I think I think just Carolina is one of those teams that's slowly declining, and I think that their cup window is closing every year that they don't win. Um, and I think that's showing this year or last year. And I think that's showing this year that I feel like they're always a team that's like one or two pieces away from making it to the Stanley Cup final. And, I think that a goaltender has definitely been one of them. Swayman would definitely elevate, but I just don't know if it's the full move. But if the Hurricane ended up getting him, they would definitely be a threat in the postseason, which is really where they need somebody to help them out. And to have a goaltender like Swayman, like that could be the next step that Carolina has needed for years. Chicago's a good move just strategically because it's a young team, it's a young unit. He might not make it to the playoffs this year, and he might not make it next year, but in a few years, like this team will be deadly. It's about the development, of the core rookies and how they could potentially play, matching that in with the veteran leadership. And I think that you would get a very good unit in Chicago with Swayman and net. And when you make that push for maybe a playoffs, like that core in the 8 years, that core time of that contract, he would be a Stanley Cup, this would be a Stanley Cup team just because they have the goaltender for it. The Kings make little sense. I think that this is a move that, like, the Kings are a team that consistently go to the playoffs and they lose. The last 3 years they've gone to the playoffs, they've just lost in dramatic fashion to the Oilers every time. And I think that a goaltender is one of those reasons. And I think this, it doesn't fix their problems, but it does help them. I think Swayman would do a great job in LA. I think that, but the question is, does he maybe want more money due to the, depending on where he goes and all that other stuff. But I think he would be okay in this situation. And I think that Boston, getting Kemper wouldn't be a bad scenario. Although I do feel like, I just don't know how I feel like both teams would be at if a trade for the Kings happened. The Flyers make a lot of sense. Well, actually, that's not true, but they're a team that's developing, and they exceeded expectations last year. They don't really have a number one goalie anymore, and if they have Swayman in that net, it would help their problem for the next few years, and they could be competing in a few years once some of their young players develop and all that stuff. They obviously have made some key moves over the last 2 years to try to help them get better. And I think they've done that, and I think that they could do it in a few years and be not a championship team, but definitely a contending team. A championship team similar to Colorado and Carolina, Las Vegas. If the Vegas Golden Knights somehow pulled off the heist of the century to get Swayman, I think that the NHL might burn down everything. Because every year Vegas finds that top free agent, that top trade candidate, that top something, and they end up getting them somehow, some way. Now you could look at their cup win, and it's like, okay, towards the trade deadline, what did they really do, to bring him in? And they made some smart moves by getting a guy like Teddy Bluger, and they made the right moves. And I think that one thing that's very underrated, and honestly, like the Jonathan Quick move, but I think one thing that's really underrated about what Vegas does is they find ways to make sure that they could eventually keep a good core and a good unit. And what would happen with this Vegas trade, and because I'm going to do a lot of videos about Vegas, is like they would have to probably get rid of one of their defensemen, and they don't have to get rid of one of their top three. I believe if they just get rid of someone like Whitecloud and also Hill in the trade, they would have just enough cap space to take on a contract on like 8 years. By the way, the initial offer and the highest offer that Bruins have given him is 7.5, I believe, or 7.8, something weird like that. And the Swayman wants 8.5. We'll talk about that in a minute because of when I make my final prediction where he'll end up. But if Vegas ends up getting him, the NHL might go crazy, because if they can continue to figure out ways to sign their guys and continue to develop their talent, and continue to win, Swayman might push Vegas, especially with that solid Vegas defense, just like Colorado. They would probably be a Stanley Cup championship team every year, or caliber at least every year. And last but not least, the Utah Hockey Club, or the Utah Yetis, because that's probably where they're going to go. It's an interesting team. It's a team that's continuing to be developed. It's going to continue to be a team that, is going to consistently move up every year as long as they don't lose a key player. And I think with this move, it would make a lot of sense because they could just sign him and then they could build from him and a few of their other key pieces. I think it's similar to similar to Chicago and the Flyers, where you're not consistently moving up. And now I'm going to already take out some teams because I know people are going to be like, how is Detroit not on this list? How are the Penguins? I just don't think that they want to, number one, for like the Sabres and the Detroit fans, I don't think they're going to want to trade him within the division. And I really don't think they want to trade him within the conference. They might be okay with a Metropolitan team taking him, but I think their offer has to be a little bit more sweeter than a Western Conference team. Now, to get back to my point, where do I think he's going to end up? And another reason that contract that I brought up was so important. I think it's so important to realize the contract because if he were to be traded, the teams that make the most sense that would probably get him are Vegas and Colorado. I think Colorado would take the opportunity and the gamble. We know Vegas will take the gamble. We know Vegas will take the gamble and say, we'll get Swayman, you get Hill, work out all this, boom. And they'll win and figure out a way to make sure that Swayman deal works out in the future. Especially because when you look at future goaltending too, Vegas has to worry about Vikman and Lindenbaum to develop. And I don't think they're patient enough to wait for one of them. And I think that they would make the money on Swayman because they know he's a younger guy, and then they could wait and develop the other guys. And then if Swayman's not doing so hot, or if they think Lindenbaum's better, we might see a trade later in the future. Or I think it might just be perfect where Lindenbaum might get, serious traction if he is as high caliber as everyone says, and at a different point. But that's why I think it makes sense for some teams, because their future at goaltending is interesting. But you offered the man $8 million. Or you told the media that you offered him $1 million, which means that you are going to now be willing to at least give up $1 million or $8 million on 8 years. You have to pay that 0.5 that Swayman wants. You have to. And someone's going to be like, no, they don't. They don't have to give him anything. They do now. If they want him to be their goaltender, and trust me, that team won't be as great with Korpisalo in net, I don't think. I think Korpisalo's game will be a little bit better, but I don't think they'll win a Stanley Cup with Korpisalo in net. And you need to trust Swayman. And I think Swayman's honestly being generous, because if he wanted to be a douchebag, he could just say, I deserve 9-point-something million and just change the goaltending market. But he's not. So I am very intrigued and very interested on what this situation is going to be, what the conclusion is of this. Like I said, I truly do believe that they'll get a deal done. They have to, I feel like, now, because if your asking price is 8.5 and you just told them that you would pay him $8 million, what's another 500 to that deal? Like what? Add a 0.5 to that thing and just call it a day, So where do I think he'll end up? Final decision, if he's, I think my final choice is that he's staying with Boston. My choice outside of Boston is, like I said, Colorado or Vegas. They make the most sense. Unless a team from left field that gives them a fantastic offer really considers, making a big push. And then you have to look at possible playoff teams that, are going to be a little iffy, But let me know what you guys think. I'm very curious on what you guys think about this, my opinions on this. Like this video if you'd like to comment down below. And yeah, are you happy for the hockey season? I am. I can't wait to start talking about the games, and join me for some watch-alongs because they're going to be great. Dominate the world, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you had a good night, a good day. Good night.